This is part 2 in a series of videos about the history and gameplay of the Magical Drop series of games. If you haven't seen part 0, the introduction, or part 1, Magical Drop 1, please check it out, as some context there may enhance reviewing here. With that out of the way, please enjoy the video. Now this is where the Magical Drop series started to sprout wings and fly high above to new heights and changes. Released in 1996 for arcades and the Neo Geo console, as well as the Neo Geo CD, which were consoles that were built with practically the same architecture as Neo Geo arcade machines, came Magical Drop 2. One thing I hadn't mentioned in the previous video on Magical Drop 1 was that the first game was released on Data East's proprietary hardware in arcades. Now, I'm no expert on arcade machines and the variety of hardware specifications, but essentially, they made the decision to build this new entry of the series on SNK Corporation's superior and very popularly used arcade hardware, which was of course the Neo Geo. Other games like Metal Slug or the famous King of Fighters series of games also ran on this hardware. The Neo Geo in general is a pretty fascinating machine too, considering its console counterpart not only ran with similar specs, but included a large library of the same exact games, but made in cartridges the size of heavy textbooks. Next time you throw a brick at someone's window, why not instead try a Neo Geo cartridge? Same difference. Though throwing a $200 to $300 cartridge is probably a bad idea. This was the only console at the time that would receive practically one-to-one ports of arcade games, whereas nearly 100% of the time before, arcade ports on consoles always had to have some downgrades or sacrifices to things like sound, performance, graphics, or even features. I know I never ran into a Neo Geo at the time because it cost literally like $650, which would be somewhere above $1,000 today. Though it did come with a neat arcade design controller. Anyway, now jumping into the developers. The development team for Magical Drop 2 was of a similar size, though seems to be smaller than the first game, with a decent amount returning who were not part of the main development team, but instead were specially thanked in the credits of the first game. Which I found to be interesting, and has me wondering if those specially thanked in the first Magical Drop were part of the team, but not listed as such due to possibly more minor roles. When compared to the original, there seems to be instead 2 supervisor roles filled by both Naomi Susa, who also supervised the first game, and Ai Horita. There is a planning credit by Saongu Katagiri, who was under the special thanks portion of the first game's credits. Tak H and 321 return as main programmers, and the only programmers at that. For graphic design, we have a handful, though less than the first game, and none of the previous graphic designers worked on this one from what I can tell. A few names of note were Mayu Sato, who also had worked on previous Data East games, Rie Sakurai, and Hiroshi Hachiya, all of which were listed under special thanks from the first Magical Drop. Though I could not find who was responsible for the changed art direction of all the characters, so I can only assume it to be a collaborative effort between the 5 graphic designers. Music was done by Akira Masa, which I assume is the alias for who I found to be Masaki Iwasaki, along with Maro returning, or as he is otherwise known as, Hiroaki Yoshida, and Shogo, both from Gamadelic. For character voices, just like the first game, the Western American release removed all the Japanese voice acting, though it seems they did have some voice work done for the European release at least. But for the Japanese voice cast, we have Mitsuyo Tsunada, returning as the Star, though not for graphic design this time. Eri Tanaka also returns as both the Devil and the Fool, Both the Chariot and the Magician have new voices. For the Chariot, we have Nobuyuki Hiyama, who has also done a ton of voice work for anime like Hiei from the popular Yu Yu Hakusho, or Ikkaku Madarame from Bleach, along with voices in Pokemon, Gundam, and many more. In addition to that, he's done games too, like Link from The Legend of Zelda, specifically in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, with a minor role as fierce deity Link for Hyrule Warriors. For the Magician, we have Isshin Chiba, who also has done plenty of voice work for both anime and games, like Mikazuki from One Piece, Koha Kuchiki from Bleach, and Jin Kazama for Tekken. Eriko Kodaira returns to voice both the High Priestess and the world. The new character, Justice, is voiced by a Ring Ring, and Strength by a Gorilla, though I believe this is just Gorilla in English. The hot Empress is voiced by the mentioned graphic designer on the team, Rie Sakurai, and what is listed as Black Pierrot is voiced by Kumiko Oka, who was another developer found under the special thanks credits of the first game. All of these were listed with their first names being only an initial, but with some cross-referencing between games and their credits, I was able to better find who worked on what as accurately as possible. I feel it's important to know the people behind these amazing games, and sadly many games during this era did not properly display who worked on them a lot of the time. But considering the era these games released, and the prevalent absurd stigma of video games worldwide, I guess it's not too surprising either. Moving on to the actual game, one of the major changes to the core mechanics is that now special balloons that held symbols can be used on the same color, rather than having to stack 3 of them to trigger the corresponding balloon color burst. As in, the star only needs 1 star-shaped blue balloon to stack on any 2 or more blue balloons vertically, to trigger an all-clear burst of all the blue balloons on the board. They are still considered separate balloons for grabbing purposes though, meaning you cannot hold a special balloon with other same colored balloons together. What Magical Drop 2 brings to the table is a revamped visual style, as not only are all the characters redrawn with a new fresh look, but they are a lot more lively, and expressive and animated than before, along with the overall feel of the game and speed kicked up a notch. Patterns that fall are also more forgiving, and designed in a way that encourages faster play in general. In addition to all of this, a few more characters have been added to the overall roster. All the characters from Magical Drop 1 return, with the Devil not being playable initially. The other returning characters are of course the Fool, the Chariot, the High Priestess, the Star, and the Magician. And on top of this, for the first time, the world is now playable. There are 4 new characters introduced into this entry, with 1 available starting out being Justice, 2 being secret characters unlocked via a cheat code, Strength, and the Empress, with the Devil being unlocked with the same method. And 1 final secret boss character who is unplayable called Black Pierrot. The character select screen also gives the player an indication on what special colored balloons each character can take advantage of, as well as their power, represented in stars, which I believe indicates how difficult their drop color pattern is. Although this clearly shows that some characters are one-sidedly more powerful than others. And while you would still have to be pretty great at the game to take advantage of the better character's strengths, it's easily noticeable how big the difference is. Unlike the first game, this entry of Magical Drop actually has more effort put into it in regards to the characters' backstories and world in general. The first Magical Drop only introduced the idea that all of these characters live in a magical world that is within a magical book, and that in this world, they are all fighting each other to obtain the magical drops that would fulfill any wish. But beyond that, all that we would see when beating a character's arcade mode was a portrait of them symbolizing victory, I guess? It wasn't very clear is what I'm saying. Now in Magical Drop 2, there actually is a story involved with each character, and even a main villain, the Empress. Although still very vague from what I gather, the Empress has a hold of the Magical Drops themselves and is then running a tournament for them. Or I think so. Or holding them hostage so all the other characters are coming to get them from her before she possibly makes her wish? Yeah, it's still not totally clear, but what is are the funny endings that have been added to the game. Now each character has their own ending, and it's only here where we get a bit of what they are like beyond their voice lines and animated expressions during the battles. I like this, as it was the very thing I was expecting and wanting from the first game. Plus, the Empress alone makes it all worth checking out. However, there is one huge problem with this. As you can probably tell by the footage, it's all in Japanese. Unfortunately, the localization of both the American and European releases removed all the cutscenes in the game, with the exception of the opening cutscene showing off all the characters. I guess they didn't want those 30 seconds of an ending keeping players on the machine? Or maybe it was easier to not bother translating all of it? Whatever the case, both the American and European versions are entirely missing the context of the characters and plot. Not that there was that much of it to begin with, but that was not all they removed. They also entirely removed the puzzle mode. Yeah, you know, that mode that more or less teaches you different patterns and how to approach them while giving you an idea how fast you can clear them? Totally gone. Again, maybe they didn't want players on the machines for that long, or they didn't want to encourage solo play hogging the machine. I guess another theory is 2 players always makes more money since you have 2 paying customers. Any time spent on solo play is a single customer's cash taking time away from what could possibly be 2 players playing together. Because even if there is one player playing the story mode, at any point during his time a second player can come in and interrupt his play by adding some cash to the machine to trigger 2-player versus play. Another great improvement to the game is the addition of character-specific music themes. One of my main criticisms of the first game was that it only had one looping theme song the majority of the time, with the exception of a slower variation in puzzle mode, a faster variation when losing, and the final boss theme against the world. This one has a theme for every character now, and that looping theme from the first game got a new rendition that has now become the Fool's main music theme. And dude, the music in this game is freaking amazing. It rocks. The final boss theme against the Empress, her theme is epic. Well, if you can even last long enough to hear it, honestly. The difficulty is absurdly high in the story mode, unfortunately. Even when I lower it down to level 1 of 8, the Empress just does not care at all. I was only able to beat her twice, each time by complete luck alone. The first time, just trying to reach the end and become rewarded with no endings, which is when I realized the international version had none of the endings. And a second time in the Japanese version, just to see what the endings even looked like. Sure, I probably could have just looked them up beforehand, but I kind of wanted to earn it myself, you know? And despite the fact you can adjust the difficulty, in practice, it seemingly does nothing. So other than those localization changes I had mentioned, all 3 main modes from the first game return here. The arcade mode, now named Story Mode, the puzzle mode, and a survival mode, with the international release removing the puzzle mode and renaming survival mode as the puzzle mode, which got really confusing. Puzzle mode has multiple difficulties you can choose from again, although there are only 3 this time. An interesting change to the puzzle mode that I'm not too fond of is that the game no longer fails you for wasting moves to solve the puzzle. Instead, you will be presented a timer with a puzzle, and once you complete it, you will get an idea if you had done it at the minimum amount of moves by receiving a perfect across your score. Otherwise, you will just receive a clear and no bonus. On top of this, if you do not clear all of the balloons with the presented arrangement, the game will drop a line of balloons of the color you need to make the clear possible. This isn't as helpful to me simply because I cannot retry the puzzle arrangement I so clearly failed to solve in the minimum amount of steps. Another change is that the puzzles presented to you are no longer done in a specific order, and are given to you semi-randomly from what I can tell, based on how far you get and what difficulty you chose. I do at least like that it moves on to the next puzzle automatically, but it would have been nice to retry a puzzle. I'm assuming this has more to do again being more practical in an arcade setting. Like, wait, what? Wait a minute. You can't interrupt me while I'm in puzzle mode? Is the minimal translation really the only reason it's missing in the international release? Well, whatever. The survival mode makes a return. What? Okay, hold on. Why is this translated? and the puzzle mode isn't? I officially have no idea what the reason could possibly be. Anyways, you tackle a seemingly endless barrage of constantly dropping balloons aiming for a high score, with other special balloons like ice balloons, aero balloons, bubble balloons, and rainbow balloons helping you to clear them all out or getting in your way. Ice balloons cover colored balloons on the board and need to be melted by clearing a color next to them. Colored balloons are interesting as they count as a third balloon of any color, and when cleared, will wipe out all balloons in the direction the arrow is facing. Rainbow balloons are balloons that can be cleared with any color and will react like a special balloon, clearing all the balloons of the same color it was burst with. Bubble balloons are just there to get in your way and separate colored balloons from each other. Another change from the first game is that the screen is far larger for this mode, and the player clown can screen wrap from one side to the other to help keep up with the larger space and quick pace of the challenge. Again, omitted in this mode in the international version is the hard difficulty. I know it says normal and hard, but these are actually the easy and normal options from the Japanese versions. One neat detail though, is that the character associated with each difficulty will actually be kinda hanging out in the background as you tackle the survival challenge. So yeah, is that all? Nope! As I had said, I was disappointed that character endings were not translated in the international versions of the game. However, Magical Drop 2 released on more than just the arcades and the Neo Geo system. It also had console releases on both the Sega Saturn and Super Famicom. Aeon Genesis, remember them? They translated the first Magical Drop on the Super Famicom for those who wanted it, but they also translated the sequel. The problem? Their translation was bought by Retrobit, who had officially licensed games from Data East. So this translation is exclusive to their 5-in-1 Data East collection for the Super Famicom. Or you can also buy their Retrobit plug and play to access this translation. They also sell a console that allows you to play the actual cartridges of Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and classic Nintendo games. It would have been nice, but yeah, it's only available through them exclusively. But not all is lost, because literally in 2020, Nintendo released the Super Famicom version of Magical Drop 2 on their Super Nintendo application for Nintendo Online subscribers. And evidently, this was the official localization that was supposed to come out back in the day and was found by an unnamed gaming enthusiast. It is all completely translated, though it does have one key difference from the Aeon Genesis translation. And that is that the dialogue between characters shown right before a match say generic lines before the match begins, whereas the Aeon Genesis translation, they have actual lines specific to the characters, like the Saturn version. But this isn't that big of a deal, considering both the international and Japanese versions of Magical Drop 2 from the arcades and Neo Geo have no lines whatsoever, as the characters just kind of stand there, like staring awkwardly at each other. Which, from what I understand, the lines they were supposed to have were dropped right before the release of the arcade original. But regardless, the endings and modes are completely intact, which is pretty awesome. And like the first Magical Drop on the Super Famicom, your controlling character is the character you select on screen. But this time, they managed to retain the animations of the characters on the background of your board, with the only compromise being some poses and frames of those animations are missing. Also, like the first game, there are 6 columns instead of 7. Another change from the arcade version is that every mode now has 6 difficulties, similar to the first game. And the story mode is actually very beatable, as the easiest difficulty is basically brain dead. Although there's no avatar ominously watching you in survival mode. Also, instead of using a cheat code every time you want to play the secret characters, all you have to do is beat the story mode once. And this version makes Black Pierrot a playable character as well. One final note about this version of the game. You know how each character clearly shows who is stronger with their power level and associated special balloons? Well, the neat change added to this version is that you can fully customize a character, mixing and matching any other character's stats. So you can literally make the Fool, or even the Devil, ultra powerful. And this is usable in versus play, keeping the playing field even, while at the same time able to use the character you like most. Due to these changes and additions, I actually prefer the Super Famicom version of Magical Drop 2 over the original arcade version. and it being easily accessible to any Switch owner who has a Nintendo Online membership is pretty awesome. Other than that though, you can actually buy Magical Drop 2 on the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and even the Nintendo Switch on their online storefronts for $7.99. Although from what I understand, the game was delisted from the European eShop, but an easy workaround is to create a Nintendo account based in the United States and buying a $10 eShop card. That should let you buy and download the arcade version. Magical Drop 2 was also previously released on other consoles, like the Wii's now defunct Virtual Console Shop, listed under the Neo Geo category, along with ports on Windows 10 and Japanese mobile phones, and even the Retrocade I had mentioned earlier by Retrobit. One more huge plus in favor of the Super Famicom version on the Nintendo Switch is the ability to play the game online with friends. If you didn't know, any game on the Super Nintendo and even the original Nintendo applications on the Switch allows you to play them online with a friend, if they are at least 2 players. Magical Drop 2 being one of these games means it has this online play functionality, and I personally had a blast playing the game online, with lag practically non-existent, which was surprising considering the results I normally get with other Nintendo games online. And with a game as fast as Magical Drop 2 requiring such speed and precision, it was more than satisfactory. Overall, I love playing Magical Drop 2. The additions of the characters, endings, and music all bring an intense and exciting ride, despite its absurdly high difficulty right at the final boss fight against the Empress in the arcade version. Probably brutal because, well, the Empress herself loves to dish out that punishment. Whereas the first one, I would only recommend playing as a novelty to see where it all started, this entry is actually worth playing, and is still very fun to play today, as well as playing against friends. It's unfortunate so much was gutted from the international release, but at least the modern ports on home consoles also include the Japanese version. But again, only the Super Famicom version on the Switch has the ability for online play, and both that and the Aeon Genesis version have English translations for the character endings. And that wraps up Magical Drop 2, a strong sequel to the original. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave a like or a dislike to let me know what you thought. And hell, leave a comment if you were at all aware this game even existed in full English on the Switch. Or at all, really. I'd like to know. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell if you haven't already if you want to be notified on the next part of this series. I'm Timmy Tryhard, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time for the Magnum Opus, Magical Drop 3. Bye!